Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Mr. Mrrboss, and in this video I'm basically going to be explaining how you can use functions, how you can write functions. But before I start, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's watching and enjoying my videos. If you really want to show me how much you're enjoying my videos, you can just leave a like and subscribe to my channel. I feel like it would also help me with the motivation and everything, to push and stuff like that. Other than that, back to functions. So functions are very important, guys. So I cannot stress this enough, guys. Functions are very important. In fact, if you want to write readable, neat code, of course, you can use blank spaces and tab outs and stuff like that. However, it's very important to use functions because yeah, functions are actually blocks of codes that we write to perform specific tasks. Like for instance, what I said in the previous video, you can have a function that does addition, you can have a function that does multiplication, you can have a function that does all those things. So if I just use my Control Z over here to go back to the previous code that I was working on in my previous tutorial, I think you can see that inside the int main function over here, we have a lot of things, and this can be so hard to debug. Let's say for instance we have a problem somewhere. It can be so hard to debug considering the fact that we have a code that does subtraction over here, and then we have a code that does multiplication over here and all that. So with functions, I can have all this in different places, meaning that if I know that I'm trying to multiply two things, instead of me running through my code to try to find out where exactly multiplication is, I can simply go to my function, which consists of my multiplication, and then from there I can do some debugging. All right, so basically one of the or the most important reason why we use functions is to prevent several code duplications, and also to make our code much easier to read. So I feel like if you're gonna have all your code inside the int main function, it's easy for you to duplicate code and have code that does the same thing but without you noticing, and that can actually result in a lot of problems in the long run. It can result in now code actually crashing or anything of that sort. Or another reason why we love functions so much in coding is because functions make our code readable. Like I said in my previous point, it's very important for you to actually know how to debug your code. It's actually very important for you to know how to see your errors. Sometimes your code might not be giving you errors. However, it's not actually doing what it's supposed to do. And that is where functions come in, because when it's not doing what it's supposed to do, and what it's supposed to do is multiplication, then in that case, you know exactly, okay, fine, to fix this problem, I need to go to my multiplication function. All right. Now, to write a function, you basically need to provide the data type. You also need to provide the data type and the name of the function. But you don't have to worry about this. I'm gonna go into the syntax right now. So we can provide a function with certain parameters inside the parentheses. Like for instance, we have an int main function over here. Inside these brackets over here, we can basically include parentheses. That's what you call parentheses. These are parentheses, and we can include parameters. Parameters are additional information that a function basically needs. Like for instance, let's say for instance, this is an integer function. We can include parameters like for instance, int a and int b. These are parameters. This is additional information of which, if we have a function that is going to be like this. Oh, I'm really sorry, guys, if that was a disturbance. It's actually raining outside, and yeah, hopefully it doesn't disturb us that much. So in this case, obviously, we're gonna have int a and int b as our parameters, as our additional information for the function. However, please note that the int main function, the main function, does not require any parameters. It does not require any specific return or anything of that sort. It's okay like that, because that is the first function that our computer program or our computer goes to when it's running. So now let's say we want to create a function that is going to multiply numbers. You can create a function below the int main. You can create a function above the int main. it all depends with your style of code, because as people would code differently. So if you want to create a function above int main, then from there, let me just do that right now. So what you need to do is you need to provide the data type. We need to provide the data type, which is also called the return value, or the type that our function will return. So in this case, we have our function return a 0. That is the int main function. It returns a 0. And that is because that is how it's supposed to be. However, in some cases, let's say, for instance, we have an int function, int function. This specific function is supposed to return an integer. So without wasting time, so I'm going to create an int function, and then I'm going to give my function multiplication. And the reason why I'm giving my function multiplication, the term multiplication, is because it's very important to give your function a specific name that is related to what the function is going to do. Like if you're going to give your function the name run whilst the function actually does some multiplication, it's going to be a problem, because when it comes to debugging, you're not going to know where multiplication is. All right, so it's very important to give your function the specific name that your function what your function is going to do. Basically, if it's going to do multiplication, give your function the term multiplication. If it's going to do addition, give your function name should be addition. Of course, you can give it any other name. You can give it Mr. Mrrboss, you can give it YouTube, you can give it whatever name you want. However, it's going to be very hard for you to debug. So I'd advise you to actually give it a name that is related to its specific task. All right, so in this case, our function int function is called multiplication, because it's going to be performing multiplication. Of course, this is the long-term multiplication. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add my parenthesis over there. Like I said before, you can include parameters. You can leave out parameters. It all depends on you as a person. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write another function in my next video, where I'm basically going to be including the parameters. In this specific function, I'm not going to include parameters, because I'm trying to introduce you to the idea of functions. So if I include parameters, it can become complicated, because I'm going to have to introduce certain things and stuff like that. So in this case, I'm just going to have my function, not have parameters. So hopefully you understand when I go into the one where you have to include parameters and all that. All right, so after writing the data type, the function name, including parentheses, you need to include the open and closing braces. All right, so after putting the braces, what you need to do is you're basically going to write your statements in here. Yeah, this is where you're going to write your statements, what you want your function to basically do. So in this case, of course, the first thing first, I need to declare my variables. I did talk about variables in my previous tutorials. So you just need to go back if you don't understand, or if you don't know what variables are, go back, look at variables, and try to understand how to basically declare your variables and how to also initialize them, which is basically assigning values to your variables. Let's just make these variables integers, right? Just to make our life easier, for the sake of understanding this specific example. So I have assigned my values, my values to my variables. As you can see, I did not include the data type before the name of the variable, because this is now assigning values to my variables. You don't need to include the data type. It's just x is equals to 5, y is equals to 3. So if I do run this code at this specific time, it's not going to give me any problems, because I have specified before that it is an integer. All right, and then from there, I'm going to say, right below answer here, I'm going to basically say answer is equals to x multiplied by y. All right, so guys, please note that this is the most basic way of writing a function and also doing multiplication. Of course, I could have done this in a much easier way. In any case, if let's say, for instance, you are a person who knows how to code and everything like that, and you're watching this video and you're thinking, why are you taking the long route? I'm actually doing this because not everyone actually understands how to write a specific function, how to write a basic function. So I'm going to try to easy, you guys, and I'm going to try to explain everything in a much more detailed way. So like I said, in answer is equals to x multiplied by y, and then what I can do is I can write the return type, return answer, right? And why am I returning answer? Because I said this is an int type and our answer is also an integer, meaning that we want it to return the answer, which is an integer. So remember what I said about this main function returning a 0. This main function is supposed to return a 0 because it is the main function. It is how C++ is. If you have a problem with that, you can go and take it on with people who created C++. Here we're doing application and all that. So this specific function is supposed to return an answer, right? So now I am done with my function. This is my function from int multiplication all the way until the closing braces. This is how you write a function. Now you're thinking to yourself, okay, Sharp, I've written my function, then now what? So if I run this, let's see what is going to happen. I just want to show you something. Saving a little bit of time. Okay, so when I run my function, I think you can see, guys, it does not return anything. It's just a black screen. And that is because I need to basically I need to call my function, you know, like I think you can see, you can look at my function and say, okay, fine, we have our function complete and all that. Why is it not returning the answer? 5 times 3 is supposed to be 15. Why is it not returning 15? Why is it just a blank screen? And that is because we need to call our function inside our int main. Because remember what I said, int main is the first function that our program looks at when it's running. It goes direct to int main. It skips everything and then goes to int main, and then from there, if there's anything inside int main that needs to be executed, it's going to execute that. So in this case, inside int main, of course, I need to call my function. To call the function, you basically need to write the name of the function with open with the parentheses. So I'm just gonna copy this to save time, and then I'm gonna paste it. So now you're thinking to yourself, why is it that when you're writing the function, you included the data type? However, when you're calling the function, you don't include the data type. It's because that is how it's supposed to be. The same way when I was declaring the variables, I included the data type, but when I was actually assigning values to the variables, I didn't include the data type. The same rule applies when you're dealing with functions. However, please do not forget to include the parentheses when you're writing, when you're calling your function. Remember, calling someone, calling a person, you just call them by name. You don't call them by their gender or anything of that sort. So in this case, you have to treat the int as though it's the gender. So if you're calling someone, you don't say man, Mr. Mrrboss. No, you're just going to say Mr. Mrrboss, and that is it. And then from there, I'm going to answer you. So the same rule applies here. All right, so if I run this specific code with my function and everything, it's supposed to output the answer. It's supposed to output the answer, which is 15. So let's go ahead and let's run this and let's see what is going to happen. All right, let's just wait for it and let's see what is going to output. Okay, so it didn't output the answer, and now I'm realizing that I forgot to see out this. So I'm gonna say see out answer and end line. All right, so in this case, right now it's supposed to see out the answer. So I'm really sorry about that. But remember, debugging is part of the process. Debugging is part of the learning process of coding. You're never gonna get something right the first time. Of course you can, but in most cases you have to revisit your code and see exactly where you went wrong. So let's run it now. Let's see what is gonna happen. All right, so I think you can see it did output the answer 15 as required, even though our data is basically in our function. So that is the function of functions. That statement sounds so wrong, but that is what you basically use functions for. So I can have another function which basically does addition. I can have another function which basically does division and all that. And everything could be easier. You know, like let's say, for instance, we had a bunch of functions. You can simply go to a function that does multiplication if your multiplication is not working well, or you can go to a function that does addition and all that. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate you guys sticking with me. In the next video, I'm gonna be explaining how you can write a function below the int main, and I'm also gonna explain how to include parameters inside our function. All right, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next video.